it written down, but apparently.
No, we're in. We're in.
Oh, we're in.
Good morning. Welcome to worship this Sunday.
Well, we're not getting any sound.
With the community of Westside Unitarian Universalist Church, where compassion leads us to work for justice and equality. My name's Carol Kappa, and I'm your worship leader this morning. I'm glad you're joining us for our virtual service today, and it is my hope that this gathering will renew your sense of community and connection and nourish your heart, mind, and spirit. Our interim minister, the Reverend Frida Gillespie, has the week off. Today's reflection is from our Soul Matters program and from the Reverend Claudia Jiménez. Claudia has served as the UU Congregation of Asheville's Minister of Faith Development since 2018. Prior to her ordination, Reverend Jiménez served as Director of Religious Education at the UU Fellowship of Vero Beach, Florida, from 2001 to 2018. She has 10 years of teaching experience in middle school science and in elementary schools in Colombia, Brazil, Canada, and Florida. While in Vero Beach, she also was elected for 2 terms to the Indian River County School Board from 2008 to 2016. She is a certified religious educator through the Liberal Religious Educators Association, and she is also trained as Our Whole Lives facilitator and a certified sexuality educator. I want to thank our AV team volunteers today, host Spencer Maxwell and co-hosts Caroline Nixon and Donald Kennard. And special thanks to Nikki Kennedy for putting together today's service. At Westside, we are raising the next generation of Unitarian Universalists, and we want them to know that they are an important part of our community. Several years ago, we chose to be radically inclusive and to adopt multi-generational worship where our services include our children of all ages. Westside is a community of many beliefs, genders, and sexualities, a community of diverse cultural, racial, class backgrounds, a community of varied abilities and gifts. Some here find inspiration in the great books, others in the great outdoors, and others still in great conversations. But whoever you may be, we welcome you to bring your whole self into this community. If you're so moved, you can try out the chat feature on Zoom by typing in some words of welcome to both members and visitors who are joining us this morning, or you can add a joy or concern at that time. On behalf of this church community, though, I say to all, welcome. Today's order of service is a PDF, and a link was provided via email, and it will also be posted in the chat for you to download. As always, please continue to watch your email inbox for updates on church programs and opportunities. And so now I invite you to take a deep breath, and from wherever you are, settle into this sacred space that we created together. Now, let us worship together as we listen to this morning's prelude performed by Dr. Yuki Kumamoto.
In keeping with the excitement of the inauguration this week, our opening and closing words are excerpts from Youth Poet Laureate Amanda Gorman's The Hill We Climb. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and the notions of what just is isn't always justice. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. So we lift our gazes, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Scripture tells us to envision that everybody shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one should make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all of the bridges we've made.
Our opening hymn this morning is Change is Coming, performed by members of the Association for Unitarian Universalist Music Ministries. Enjoy.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know from brokenness there's hope. I know from brokenness there's hope. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? To be prepared. I know I'm scared. To be prepared. I know I'm scared. And I know from brokenness there's hope. I know
The flaming chalice is our Unitarian Universalist symbol of both the heritage of our past and the light of hope within this congregation today. Please light your chalice this morning as we light ours to the words of the Reverend Scott Taylor. In the soft light of this flame, may our lives shimmer anew. May we notice new possibility in those relationships that seem lost. May the turning of year give birth to a dream. May the emerging light pull a new story into view. May what is give way to what might be. May we believe again in the world we imagine. Our chalice lighting song was imagined this week by Leah Morris after being inspired by Amanda Gorman at the inauguration.
Hey, you guys, Leah here. So I must be among millions, if not billions of people who tuned in to the inauguration yesterday on January 20th, 2021. And I was inspired by every moment of it, but especially wrapped and lifted, exalted, just completely fixated and moved by Amanda Gorman's poem, her presence, her beauty, her artistry. And so this song was born. There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to see it. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always light. There is always dark. There is always light. There is always dark. To see the light, to be the light, to shine in the dark of night and be a climb this hill. Together we will. There is always shine. There is always dark. There is always shine. There is always dark. Be the light.
I invite you to join me in reciting our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Our time for all ages today will be presented by Jana Kennard.
Good morning, West Side. Today, in Time for All Ages, we're going to find out how something as simple as this, these, and this can bring about creativity, reinvention, renewal, inspiration, rebuilding, transformation, thinking outside the box. Please join me for a world of possibilities. It was a perfect square. It had 4 matching corners and 4 equal sides, and it was perfectly happy. But on Monday, the square was cut into pieces and poked full of holes. It wasn't perfectly square anymore. So it made itself into a fountain. It babbled and giggled and clapped. On Tuesday, the square was torn into scraps, so it made itself into a garden. On Wednesday, the square was shredded in strips, so it made itself into a park. On Thursday, the square was shattered, so it made itself into a bridge. On Friday, the square was snipped into ribbons. So it made itself into a river. On Saturday, the square was crumpled and ripped and wrinkled. So it made itself into a mountain. On Sunday, the square waited to see what was next. It waited and waited. Nothing happened. Its 4 equal sides were confining. Its 4 matching corners were rigid and cramped. So it made itself into a window that looked out on a mountain, that gave birth to a river, that was crossed by a bridge, that led to a park, that was home to a garden, that had at its center a fountain that babbled and giggled and clapped.
Thank you, Jana. Today's joys and concerns will be shared by a representative of the pastoral care team, Kelly Flanagan.
Good morning. As we share our joys with others, those joys are multiplied. When other hearts know our joy shines all the brighter. As we share our concerns, our community can offer its care. When other hearts know our sorrow, our burden becomes lighter. This is the time in our service when we offer witness and support for one another's journeys. Please post in the chat if you have a joy or concern you would like to share with everyone today. and those who will watch the recording later. Joys and concerns can be submitted anytime via email to the pastoral care through the web form located in the care and support page of the church website. The email is pastoralcare@westsideu or through the web form located on the care and support page of the church's website. This week's joys and concerns include, we have a concern from Pete Metter. Beverly Boris has a daughter, Liz, who lives in Germany. Liz was diagnosed with liver cancer about 18 months ago. Beverly learned earlier this week that Liz is showing signs of liver failure, and her prognosis has been downgraded to terminal liver cancer. Beverly and her other daughter are exploring all avenues to be admitted to Germany so they can be with her. Germany has very stringent pandemic restrictions. Liz has a son in college and another son who will enter high school next year. We have a joy. It is fitting that on this global day of the belly laugh, we also celebrate the birthday of Nikki Kennedy, our beloved DLRE, that has provided so much connection for us during the pandemic. For those of you that have worked the closest with her over the last year, she has brought us multiple belly laughs. Happy birthday, Nikki. We hope your day is full of belly laughter. If we have any other joys and concerns, please feel free to share them in the chat. We have a joy from Cindy Fountain. Joy for the day of January 20th, new beginnings. Blessed be, amen. A joy from Pam Humphrey. A joy and a concern. My granddaughter, Brianna, has moved in with her almost 3-year-old daughter, Estelle. Last night, they brought home a puppy. So many changes. A concern from Barbara Cotty. My old friend is having surgery on Thursday to remove a tumor and find out how serious it is. Thank you for sharing those with us. It is good to share with one another as sharing draws our community closer together. Please know that our pastoral care associates are available to support you with deep listening and, when needed, through our InReach Fund for short-term financial support of members in need. We are here for you.
Thank you, Kelly. This morning's centering song is number 391, Voice Still and Small. Following the centering song, Diane Austin will lead us in our meditation of shared compassion.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In storm and rain, sorrow and pain, still will remain, singing.
On the wings of this music, I invite you to join in a time of centering. Each week here at Westside, we open our hearts to those in our community who know both joys and challenges, and to all suffering beings. I will begin with a brief introduction before we move into a time for silent reflection. At that point, I will ring the bell to signal the start of the time for your own meditation, prayer, or reflection, and I will ring the bell again at the end. I invite you to close your eyes and check in with your body to see if your feet are grounded, to see if your spine is tall but not stiff. As I begin. Spirit of life and love and hope, let our hearts be full of love and excitement as we share in the joys among this community. And let our spirits reach out in compassion to all who know sorrow as well, offering a loving presence to those in pain, whether spoken or too painful to share. Remind us of our connection to each other, and may that connection bring us great peace. May it be so, blessed be, and amen.
Westside has been a member of the South Central Alliance of Churches, or SCAC, since moving to the South Central area of Fort Worth. SCAC is a social service agency that provides rent and utility assistance to our neighbors in our and neighboring zip codes that have experienced an unexpected crisis, such as transportation breakdown, illness, house or apartment fire, caring for grandchildren, or job loss. During the pandemic, SCAC's single source of funds for direct aid are donations from its 6 member churches. As you can imagine, there is more need than available funds, and the Alliance finds itself turning down eligible clients every month. Please help keep our neighbors warm, clean, and from experiencing homelessness by making a donation of any amount. If you use the Give Plus app, please select the Service Project Fund, and all funds collected in January for this designated fund will be forwarded to SCAC. Thank you for your generosity while you enjoy this offering from Yuki. Thank you again for your generosity. And now we will turn our attention to the Reverend Claudia Jiménez for her reflection entitled Rekindling Moral Imagination, first delivered last March.
Early in February, I attended a clergy retreat at Montreat near Black Mountain, sponsored by the Creation Care Alliance, an ecumenical network engaging communities in caring for the earth. The purpose of the retreat was to rest, to reflect, to connect with fellow clergy, and to explore how we can cultivate hope in a time of environmental and social challenge. One of the keynote speakers, Deke Arndt, a climate scientist, shared data and information about the climate crisis. The data presented the harsh reality of what humans are doing to the planet. He shared indicators of climate change and talked about extreme weather events, unprecedented levels of rainfall in some areas, extreme temperatures in others. As I listened, I felt despair rise in my chest. And as I looked around the room, I was encouraged to see peers from different parts of the state eager to learn about what was happening and explore environmental initiatives and resources for their congregations and communities. The feeling of despair dissipated as I imagined other groups, ecumenical and secular, throughout the country doing similar work. I felt hope that collective effort could and would make a difference. Clergy who participate in the Creation Care Alliance, no matter our theology, acknowledge the moral and spiritual call to be stewards of the earth. We all have a responsibility to the planet and the people who are affected by the consequences of pollution and misuse of resources. In fact, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, it is often marginalized, vulnerable communities in our country and abroad that are affected by environmental injustice. Our Unitarian Universalist principles affirm and promote our responsibility to care for the interdependent web of all existence, to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion for all. Caring for our planet and its inhabitants is a moral issue. We can create the vision for a healthier planet and justice for its people by using our moral imagination. John Lederach, professor of international peace building, reminds us that moral imagination is rooted in reality. It's not pie in the sky imagining. It's rooted in reality and engages us in creating something that does not yet exist. And I know it isn't always easy to maintain optimism in the face of leadership that denies that there is a climate crisis and is rolling back environmental protections. Sometimes that is why we need to rekindle the moral imagination. I find it useful to consider the 4 characteristics of the moral imagination identified by Frank A. Thomas, who is a professor of homiletics, which is a fancy word for preaching. So he talks about 4 different qualities of the moral imagination. The first one is to envision equality and represent that by one's physical presence, by not just envisioning what that equality, and in fact, it's more equity than equality because there's so much disparity that just saying the same for everyone is not enough. So if we envision equity, we also have to envision what it is that we can do to make that equity happen. And so as faith communities, we are called to pursue the fiscal and political will to disrupt environmental injustice and other oppression, because we are morally bound to do so. And that, in fact, is putting our faith in action. And that is why we are participating in the UU the Vote campaign to vote love and defeat hate. But beyond voting, the campaign asks us, what are we each committing to do to get out the vote and engage in conversations about what matters to us and why this election year, and not just this year, but all the years to come. So if you haven't made a commitment yet, our goal is to have at least 100 out of 500 plus members of this congregation, 100 to make commitments to go out there and do the work beyond our vote. We have 60 so far. Would you like to add yours to that list of commitment? You can do that in Sandberg Hall today after service. So the first characteristic of the moral imagination is not just envisioning equity and equality, but doing something about it. The second one is using empathy as a catalyst or bridge to create opportunities to overcome the past and make new decisions for peace and justice. As Edmund Burke reminded us, to transcend our personal experience and embrace the dignity and humanity of other people is what the moral imagination calls us to do. And this is often difficult to do when we live in a divided country immersed in narratives of fear and misinformation that foment an us versus them mindset. There is much uncertainty. Everything is questionable. Fear abounds. It is easy to fall into the trap of demonizing those who disagree with us, to just focus on the negative. And that, theologian Howard Thurman reminds us, tends, and I quote, tends to dry up the springs of creative thought, so that one's resourcefulness becomes focused on the negative aspects of our environment. And when that happens, there remains no creative residue in one's mind and spirit to give to great ideas, to great concepts. It limits the moral imagination. So empathy as a catalyst and open-mindedness as we engage the diversity of the communities and society we live in are important. The third characteristic is that the moral imagination is grounded in sources of wisdom and truth in ancient texts and prophetic individuals in our society. Our Unitarian Universalist faith is grounded in diverse sources of wisdom, not only from the Jewish and Christian faith traditions, but from the Jewish tradition, earth-centered traditions, humanist traditions, words and deeds of prophetic people who challenged corrupt power and injustice, as well as direct experience with the transcendent. Which of these sources speak to you and provide inspiration and hope? And finally, the moral imagination embraces the language of poetry and the arts that lift and elevate the human spirit by touching emotive chords of wonder, hope, and mystery. Images, stories, dance, myths are all ways of reaching our heart self, of nurturing our imagination and grounding us for the work of creating beloved community. And I think that's why Barbara Crooker's poem resonated so deeply with me, because she was grounded in the reality of the despair that we sometimes feel when we hear the news. And then she comes back with images of things that uplift us, like nature, like cooking, like being in community. And you can fill in the blanks with whatever it is that brings you back to the sacred and to the beautiful in the world around us. So those 4 qualities, in envisioning equality and equity and getting out there and doing something to make it happen, using empathy, learning from the sources of wisdom and truth, and engaging the language of poetry and art that lifts and elevates the human spirit, are qualities that cultivate the moral imagination. In closing, I share a story from the essay, Becoming an Activist Against Fear, by Charlie Mullins Glenn, whose moral imagination propelled her to act. She grew up in a small Mormon farming community in Utah in the 1960s. Many of her family were members of the John Birch Society, who rejected big government and were convinced communists were plotting to control the world. According to Charlie, the organization was fueled by fear and preyed upon the fearful. As a child, Charlie says that she was not afraid of monsters under the bed. She was afraid of communists. One Sunday, her mother announced that she was leaving the John Birch Society. Charlie was shocked. Why? She asked. Because I've realized it's based on fear, responded her mother, quoting from the 2nd book of Timothy. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. She said, if you can't find the love, it is not of God. Love saves, fear destroys. Those words changed Charlie's life. She grew up with views filtered through the lens of Christian compassion. And that is why when our country's leadership promoted fear of immigrants, Muslims, and refugees, Charlie called on her moral imagination to create a space. A Facebook page launched January 2017. It was a vehicle for like-minded people to join forces to counterbalance the fear and to call for decency, compassion, and ethics in our government. They called themselves Mormon Women for Ethical Government, welcoming over 4,000 women across the political spectrum, Mormon and non-Mormon alike, all compelled to act to push back against fear and hate and side with love. As they grew, they became a nonprofit lobbying for the marginalized in Washington and state capitals, organizing rallies in the southern border, advocating for dreamers, and registering over 20,000 voters. Their motto is, we will not be complicit by being complacent. These women imagined and chose to act on the side of love over fear. So my friends, what scares us? What breaks our hearts when we wake up in the morning? What are we willing to be activists for? As you consider these questions, reflect on how individual time, talent, resources, and for some privilege can contribute to creating a healthier planet and justice for its people. May we be willing, each of us, to use our moral imagination to side with love and not be complacent. May we embrace the qualities of the moral imagination by envisioning equality and equity and showing up, getting proximate, using empathy as a catalyst to build bridges across our differences, learning from sources of wisdom and truth, engaging the language of poetry and art to uplift us as we do this difficult work. In doing so, may we find ways to be activists for love. Because as philosopher and activist Cornel West reminds us, love is what justice looks like in public. What are we each willing to be activists for?
Our closing hymn this morning is Pure Imagination, performed by the SoCal Vocals.
Okay, you lead the way, make sure I don't get run over.
Come with me, and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you want a view of paradise, sound of viewing, or anything you want to do it, wanna change the world, there's nothing to it. There is no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly. If you wanna view paradise, simply close your eyes and see what. Wanna be a dreamer, be one. Wanna change the world. There's work to be done. There is work to be done. You'll be in a world of pure imagination. Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. There is no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you choose. If you should come with me, if you truly wish to be.
Let the globe, if nothing else, say, this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew. Even as we hurt, we hoped. That even as we tired, we tried. That we'll forever be tied together victorious. not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the West. We will rise from the windswept Northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked South. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When the day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, and if only we're brave enough to be it.
You may extinguish our chalice and join me in the congregational closing. Let us go in peace, believe in peace, and create peace in our lives and in the world. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.